by this point in our lives, we here at Team Triple Jump are used to finding out that exciting new titles that we were looking forward to have been cancelled. Sadly, it comes with the territory, though sometimes it does feel like for every great game that does get a launch, there's another that heads off to the great video game console in the sky. A moment for our fallen brethren, if you wouldn't mind. A few years ago, we chronicled our disappointment at 10 cancelled video games that never saw release, and for today's list, we're back to do the exact same thing. Only games that are confirmed to be cancelled, or are indefinitely on hold, which let's face it, is as good as cancelled, rather than those that are delayed or stuck in a long protracted development are welcome here. And if you don't see a game that you think should be on this list, check out our other video on the subject. So join us now, as we pour ourselves a drink and reflect on all of those wonderful things that could have been. I'm Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are 10 more cancelled video games that never saw release. Number 10, World of Darkness. There have been a whole load of video games based on the World of Darkness tabletop RPGs released over the years, so it's not exactly like we're short of titles filled with monsties, ghoulies and other assorted folklore beasties. Still, it would have been nice to get our hands on an MMORPG set in that universe, and that's exactly what we would have gotten from World of Darkness had it ever seen the light of day. The game started development in 2006, and had it made it to launch, it would have allowed players to assume the role of humans, like we all definitely are here at Team Triple Jump, who could be turned into vampires of several different clans, each with their own abilities, like we are definitely not. Regrettably, World of Darkness was faced with a long and troubled development, during which staff were frequently reorganised, which slowed down progress on the project and led to work being done, abandoned, and then redone repeatedly. After 7 years of development, studio CCP Games claimed that the game was still years away from being ready, and following a series of layoffs, World of Darkness ended up being cancelled in 2014. Number 9, Pirates of the Caribbean. Armada of the Damned. Over the years, we gamers have gotten to play a veritable smorgasbord of seafaring titles. Sid Meier's Pirates was delighting swashbuckling players all the way back in the 1980s, as well as in the 2000s when it got a remake. And despite taking a while to find its sea legs, Sea of Thieves has been keeping modern scallywags occupied with more roving, reaving and raiding than they could shake a plank at. Still, despite all of the other booty hunting options out there in video game land, it still would have been nice to get our hands on Pirates of the Caribbean Armada of the Damned, which, had it been finished, would have been an open world RPG in which players got to become a salty sea dog in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe. Set before the events of the Curse of the Black Pearl, Armada of the Damned would have focused its attention on James Sterling, a pirate captain whose reputation relied on the choices made by the player. Act like a civilized human being, and Sterling would become well respected, but behave like a scoundrel, and he'd gain notoriety for all of the wrong reasons. We'd like to say that the reason behind this game's cancellation was an interesting one, but in the end, it was axed due to studio restructuring. How disappointing. Number 8, Legacy of Kain, Dead Sun. The Legacy of Kain series has been hanging around our console since 1996, and although it's had its ups and downs, the games have been pretty acceptable, each telling different facets of the story of the vampire Kain and his lieutenant-turned-wraith, Raziel. Sadly, fans of the series haven't gotten a new chapter in 2 decades, as the planned follow-up to 2003's Legacy of Kain Defiance never made it out of the gate. In fact, it never made it as far as being announced, and was only uncovered after the announcement of Nosgoth, the multiplayer spin-off. According to a number of leaks, Legacy of Kain Dead Sun was heavily inspired by Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver and The Legend of Zelda, and would have featured an open world, dungeon crawling, violent combat, puzzle solving and boss encounters. It would have been set in the far future, with players controlling a duo of new protagonists, Vampire Gain and human Asher, as they attempted to unravel the mystery surrounding a vampire child. Alas, the game was cancelled by Square Enix Europe, and although parts of it became Nosgoth, it was still a huge blow to fans when they found out what they could have won. Legacy of Kain Dead Sun, more like, this Legacy of Kain game's dead, son! Got 'em, and all that. Number 7, Agent. Now, I know we said in the intro that the game could only be considered for this list if it was confirmed to be cancelled, but let's face it, Agent is never happening. Teased in 2007 and formally announced in 2009, Agent was set to be a brand new IP for developer and publisher Rockstar, and would have tasked players with stealthing about a Cold War setting, undertaking various counter-intelligence missions and political assassinations. It sounds rad, but sadly, it's never seen the light of day and probably never will. In 2009, Rockstar did a Q&A that stated Agent could be released as early as 2010, but the year came and went, and the game failed to materialise. In 2011, Take-Two Interactive, the company that owns Rockstar Games, confirmed that Agent was still in active development, but shared no information about the title. Despite Rockstar not officially confirming the cancellation of Agent, most have come to the conclusion that the game is dead in the water. Considering the fact that there has been no news for years, it's been removed from Rockstar's website, and the company has stopped renewing its trademark. Oh well, at least Grand Theft Auto 6 will be out soon, right, guys? Number 6, Van Buren. If you've never heard of Van Buren, we can't say we're all that surprised. We can guarantee, however, that you'll have heard of the game it was supposed to become, Fallout 3. If you're a fan of the Fallout series, you'll probably know that the first 2 games were isometric RPGs, developed by Interplay Entertainment and Black Isle Studios respectively. The second was released in 1998 and proved mighty popular with players, so it only made sense that another title should follow. Black Isle Studios and Interplay Entertainment span up Van Buren, a game that, had it made it all the way through development, would have been released as Fallout 3. Though not a direct sequel to Fallout 2, the game would have been set in the same universe, with the player taking on the role of an escaped prisoner. Gosh, it already sounds like a Bethesda game and they weren't even involved yet. Alas, things were not good at Interplay HQ, and the company ended up laying off all of the Black Island Studio staff, meaning that Van Buren was no more. Thankfully, this wasn't the end for the Fallout franchise. Bethesda acquired the single-player rights and continued the series, though their Fallout 3 was nothing like the vision that Black Isle and Interplay had for Van Buren. Number 5, LMNO. No, this isn't some cool new text speech that Gen Z are doing that stands for something like laughing my nards off. It's actually a cancelled action game that's perhaps most notable for the fact that Steven Spielberg was involved. LMNO saw Spielberg partnering with EA and Arcane Studios, the French developers behind the likes of the Dishonored series and Deathloop, to create a game that combined things like first-person parkour, role-playing and storytelling that aimed to evoke emotion from its players. Should it have been released, the game would have followed the player character as they escorted an alien-like creature away from a government laboratory on the east coast of the US to the west coast, all the while hiding the creature's alien nature from other humans. Despite being worked on between 2005 and 2010, LMNO was ultimately cancelled. The reason? Well, nobody's super clear on that, though it was rumoured that it was due to the fact that the Saboteur, developed by Pandemic Studios and released in 2009, was so similar to the vision that the teams behind LMNO had. You might even go as far to say that the Saboteur lived up to its name. Number 4, Project Titan. These days, Blizzard Entertainment is best known for being an absolutely horrible place to work, especially if you're a woman. A few years ago, though, the name Blizzard was synonymous with high-quality video games, with the company's flagship series, Warcraft, Starcraft and Diablo, attracting player bases in their millions and garnering review scores in their 90s. Not content with 3 blockbuster franchises, Blizzard had plans for a brand new MMO under the codename Titan, which was set for release in 2013. Not much is known about Project Titan, though information given by anonymous Blizzard employees suggests that, had it ever been developed, the game would have been set on a futuristic version of Earth, in which players would hold down mundane jobs by day and fight enemies by night. Regrettably, the game never came to fruition, and Project Titan was officially cancelled in September 2014. According to industry experts, this would have cost Blizzard somewhere in the region of $50 million, a sum of money that is certainly not to be sniffed at. Not all was lost, though, as some of Project Titan's assets were used to create the 2016 multiplayer first-person shooter Overwatch. Silver linings, eh? Number 3, Gotham by Gaslight. In recent years, Rocksteady Studios and Warner Bros. Games Montreal have given us Bat fans 4 brilliant games that centre on the exploits of the Caped Crusader and all Gotham ne'er-do-wells. Still, whilst sashaying your Bat cheeks around modern-day Gotham is fine, wouldn't it be great to see how Brucey Dubs would have gotten on in the 19th century? We came somewhat close to finding out a few years ago, as one developer had the bright idea to turn the Batman one-shot comic, Gotham by Gaslight, into a video game. The comic tells the story of Bruce Wayne as he becomes Batman in the late 1800s, just as Jack the Ripper has made his way to Gotham and begun murdering its civilians. This would have made for a very interesting video game indeed, had it ever gotten out of the planning stages. Day One Studios, who are responsible for the likes of Fear 3 and Fracture, wanted to adapt the comic into a game, even going as far as to produce test footage, but when it was pitched to THQ, they either couldn't or wouldn't acquire the rights, which meant that Gotham by Gaslight never made it out of the gate. Number 2, Star Wars 1313. Star Wars is great, isn't it? Even when it's bad, looking at you, Attack of the Clones, it's still pretty darned good. With that said though, it never really gets dark or gritty. Sure, there are dark moments, like having your legs chopped off and then getting set on fire. Isn't exactly the ideal Tuesday, but that's about as bad as it gets for the folks in the Star Wars cinematic universe. What we fans would really enjoy is the opportunity to delve into the seedy underbelly of the galaxy far, far away. Enter Star Wars 1313, a slightly grimy beacon of hope for anyone that's more bounty hunter than Jedi Knight. The game would have focused its attention on Boba Fett, as he navigated his way around the scummy underground of Coruscant in an area known as Level 1313. Unlike previous Star Wars video games, 1313 would have had a more mature tone, giving players a look at the less savoury side of the Galactic Empire. Alas, it was not meant to be, and when the Walt Disney Company purchased Lucasfilms, the game was put on indefinite hold. Considering that it's been over a decade since that happened, we're not holding out much hope for 1313 ever going back into development. And number 1, Half-Life 2, Episode 3. About once a year, we here at Team Triple Jump go through the 5 stages of grief due to the cancellation of Half-Life 2 Episode 3. You know, denial, bargaining, crying while eating an entire tub of fish food, beating James senseless with a copy of the orange box, and of course, acceptance. Announced in May 2006 for a 2007 release, Half-Life 2 Episode 3 was set to conclude the story arc that began in Half-Life 2. Considering that Episode 2 ended on a cliffhanger, audiences thought that a third and final episode was a dead cert, but oh how wrong they were. 2007 came and went, and audiences were still somewhat Episode 3-less. Valve released very little in the way of information on the project in the following years, which led fans to suspect that the game would never materialise. Ultimately, Valve abandoned the project and episodic development as a whole, on the grounds that they wanted to create more ambitious games. A short story released by Half-Life series writer Mark Laidlaw was published in 2017, and many believed it to be the plot summary of Episode 3. Sadly, this would be the nearest thing that fans would get to a conclusion for the series.